So let us get on with chapter 6 in Katzing and Trevor's book of pharmacology, which is Introduction to Autonomic Pharmacology. So the autonomic nervous system, or the ANS, is a major involuntary automatic portion of the nervous system and contrasts in several ways with the somatic nervous system. The anatomy, the neurotransmitter chemistry, the receptor characteristics and functional integration of the ANS are discussed in this chapter. Okay, so coming to the basic introduction, we'll discuss the basic anatomy of the ANS, the types of neurotransmitters, the transmitter synthesis, storage, release, and termination, the types of various receptors found in the ANS, and also the effects and regulation of the drugs which act on the ANS. So, coming to the anatomical aspects of the ANS, the motor or efferent portion of the ANS is a major neural pathway for information transmission from the central nervous system to the involuntary effector tissues. So, what are the involuntary effector tissues? The autonomic effector tissues. So, they are the smooth muscles. Okay, then you have the cardiac muscle. Okay, so it is branched. All right. So you have the smooth muscle, you have the cardiac muscle, and you have various exocrine glands. Okay. So its two major subdivisions. The two major subdivisions of the ANS are sympathetic and parasympathetic. So the parasympathetic system and the sympathetic system. The enteric nervous system is a semi-autonomous part of the ANS located within the gastrointestinal tract with specific functions for the control of this organ system. The neuron cell bodies of the ANS are located in the myenteric plexus. Okay, the cell bodies are located here in the myenteric plexus or plexus of Auerbach, and also in the submucous plexus or the plexus of Meissner. These neurons send motor and sensory axons to the GI motor and secretory cells, and they also provide sensory input to the parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous systems and receive motor output from them. There are many sensory afferent fibers in the autonomic nerves. These are of considerable importance for the physiological control of the involuntary organs, but are directly influenced by only a few drugs. In contrast, many drugs have important effects on the motor functions of these organs. The sensory fibers of the vagus nerve also seem to play an important but poorly understood role in modulating several CNS functions, as evidenced by the development of chronic intermittent stimulation of the vagus as a therapy for refractory seizure disorders. So, we need to first learn some high yield terms, that is, first, adrenergic or noradrenergic. A nerve ending that releases norepinephrine as the primary transmitter, also a synapse in which norepinephrine is a primary transmitter. So then we have adrenoceptor or adrenergic receptor, and that is a receptor that binds and is activated by one of the catecholamine transmitters or hormones such as norepinephrine, epinephrine, and dopamine and related drugs. Next, what is a baroreceptor reflex? We talked about this in physiology, and this is the basic homeostatic mechanism that maintains a constant MAP, that is mean arterial blood pressure. The sensory limb originates in the baroreceptors of the carotid sinus and the aortic arch, and efferent pathways run in parasympathetic and sympathetic nerves to the heart and blood vessels. What are the parasympathetic nerves? So the afferents are glossopharyngeal and vagus, and the efferents are vagus nerves. And then what does cholinergic mean? So it is a nerve ending that releases ACH, and it is also a synapse in which the primary transmitter is ACH. And then the same thing for the cholineceptor or cholinergic receptor. Dopaminergic, the same thing. Dopamine is a primary transmitter. And then what is a homeostatic reflex? So it is a compensatory mechanism for maintaining a body function at a predetermined level. For example, the baroreceptor reflex is a pressure for blood pressure control. Okay, it is a reflex for blood pressure control. Then we have the non-adrenergic, non-cholinergic or NANC system. So nerve fibers associated with autonomic nerves that release any neurotransmitter other than norepinephrine or acetylcholine, because we'll be talking about these two mainly. Then we have parasympathetic. So the parasympathetic nervous system, it is a part of the autonomic nervous system that originates in the cranial nerves. Okay, what are those parasympathetic cranial nerves? 3, 7, 9 and 10. And also the sacral part of the spinal cord. So it is also called as craniosacral outflow, whereas the sympathetic nervous system is also referred to as a thoracolumbar outflow. Okay, it originates in the thoracic and lumbar parts of the spinal cord. So what are presynaptic and postsynaptic receptors? So receptors located on the nerve ending from which the neurotransmitter is released into the synapse is the presynaptic receptor, and it modulates the release of the neurotransmitter. and a receptor located on the distal site of a synapse, for example, a postganglionic neuron or autonomic effector cell, is a postsynaptic receptor. So, the parasympathetic preganglionic motor fibers originate in the cranial nerve nuclei 3, 7, 9, and 10, and traditionally in the sacral segments S2 to S4 of the spinal cord. Recent research indicates that the sacral fibers are actually sympathetic cholinergic fibers, not parasympathetic cholinergic fibers. The sympathetic preganglionic fibers originate in the thoracic T1 to T12, lumbar L1 to L5, and if confirmed, the S2 to S4 segments of the cord. Most of the sympathetic ganglia are located in two paravertebral chains that lie along the sides of the spinal column in the thorax and abdomen. So basically, if this is your spinal cord, okay, you have certain sympathetic ganglia, okay, like this, okay. So all the preganglionic fibers, that is why the sympathetics, the preganglionic fibers are short and the postganglionic fibers are long, and the opposite holds true in the case of the parasympathetic fibers. So a few of the prevertebral ganglia are located on the anterior aspect of the abdominal aorta. Most of the parasympathetic ganglia are located in the organs innervated and more distant from the spinal cord. Because of the locations of the ganglia, the preganglionic sympathetic fibers are short and the postganglionic fibers are long. The opposite is true for the parasympathetic system. Some receptors that respond to autonomic transmitters in drugs receive no innervation. These include muscarinic receptors on the endothelium of blood vessels, some presynaptic receptors on nerve endings, and in some species, the adrenoceptors on apocrine sweat glands, and alpha 2 and beta adrenoceptors in blood vessels. Okay, so the muscarinic receptors, okay, muscarinic receptors on the endothelium of blood vessels, and also some nerve endings, and also alpha 2 and beta adrenoceptors in blood vessels, and some apocrine sweat glands. Okay, they do not have any innervation. So coming to the neurotransmitter aspects of the ANS, first let's talk about cholinergic transmission. Acetylcholine is the primary neurotransmitter in all autonomic ganglia and at the synapses between parasympathetic postganglionic neurons and their effector cells. If this is the parasympathetic postganglionic neuron, okay, and this is the effector cell, okay. So ACH is what is released at this neuronal junction, okay, ACH. So it is a transmitter at the postganglionic sympathetic neurons to the thermoregulatory sweat glands. So ACH is also the postganglionic sympathetic neurotransmitter in case of sweat glands. So it is also the primary transmitter at the somatic voluntary skeletal muscle NMJ. So where all do we see ACH? We see it at the NMJ. Okay, we see it at the NMJ, neuromuscular junction. Then where else do we see that? We see that in postganglionic nerve endings of the parasympathetic neurons. Okay, and also we see them in case of sweat glands. Okay, sympathetic nerve endings for thermoregulatory sweat glands, postganglionic sympathetic neurons. So coming to the synthesis and storage, acetylcholine is synthesized in the nerve terminal by the enzyme choline acetyltransferase, okay, or acetylcholine transferase, what you can call it whatever you want. So choline acetyltransferase from acetyl-CoA produced in the mitochondria and choline transported across the cell membrane from the systemic circulation. So let us just look at the diagram. Okay, so we have choline acetyltransferase. You get choline, which is transported through the cell membrane, okay, and then choline acetyltransferase combines acetyl-CoA plus choline to form acetylcholine. Now what happens is the rate limiting step is probably the transport of choline into the nerve terminal, okay. So because it is transported into the cell, right, choline, it was coming from outside, so that is the rate limiting step, and this transport can be inhibited by the research drug hemicolinium. So as you can see here, hemicolinium can block this regulatory step. So hemi sounds like, you know, something important in a metabolic pathway. So hemicolinium is blocking the entry of choline into the nerve cell. Acetylcholine is actively transported into its vesicles for storage by the vesicle associated transporter VAT. This process can be inhibited by another research drug, that is vesamicol. So entry into the vesicles is prevented by this drug called vesamicol. Okay, it is preventing entry into the entry into the vesicles. So hemicolinium was blocking cholin's entry into the cell, whereas vesamicol is blocking entry of ACH into the vesicles. Okay, so now coming to the next step. So we have release of acetylcholine. So once it is stored in the vesicles, then the release of transmitter stores from the vesicles in the nerve endings requires the entry of calcium through calcium channels and triggering of an interaction between SNARE, that is soluble and ethyl malidamide sensitive factors. So interaction between SNARE and also, so interaction, sorry, it actually requires entry of calcium through calcium channels, so calcium influx, and also it requires triggering of an interaction between SNARE and certain proteins. So SNARE proteins include V-SNAREs associated with the vesicles, and VAMPs, vesicle associated membrane proteins. You have synaptobrevin, synaptotagmin, etc., and T-SNARE proteins. So interactions between V-SNARE and T-SNARE proteins at the terminals, nerve terminals. Okay. So for the release from the vesicles, you need Ca plus to influx. At the same time, you need interactions between snares. So what are those snares? V snares and T snares. So this interaction results in the docking of the vesicle to the terminal membrane, and with influx of calcium, fusion of the membranes of the vesicles with the nerve ending membranes, the opening of a pore to the extracellular space, and the release of the stored transmitter. The several types of botulinum toxins are able to enter cholinergic nerve terminals and enzymatically alter synaptobrevin or one of the other docking or fusion proteins to prevent the release process. So synaptobrevin, synaptotagmin, and syntaxin or SNAP25, synaptosome associated proteins, what they do is they prevent these interactions between the V snares and the T snares. So what happens is, basically within the cell, you need the vesicles of ACH to come to fuse and then to release the ACH. Alright, so this fusion with the membrane of the cell cannot occur if there is any disturbance in the snare interactions or calcium influx. So what botulinum toxins do is they are able to enter the cholinergic nerve terminals and enzymatically alter synaptobrevin or one of the other docking or fusion proteins. So now we talked about how acetylcholine was synthesized, the various drugs blocking the synthesis process, the release of acetylcholine, and now we need to talk about the termination of the action of acetylcholine. The action of acetylcholine in the synapse is normally terminated by the metabolism to acetate and choline by the enzyme acetylcholine esterase or ACH esterase in the synaptic cleft. This esterase is anchored to the postsynaptic cell but acts extracellularly. The products are not excreted but are recycled in the body, and inhibition of acetylcholine esterase is an important therapeutic and potentially toxic effect of several drugs. Now coming to the drug effects on synthesis, storage, release, and termination of action of acetylcholine. Drugs that block the synthesis of acetylcholine, such as hemicolinum, which did not allow choline to enter the cell, its storage, such as vesamicol, which did not allow acetylcholine to be stored in the vesicles, or its release, such as botulinum toxin, which altered synaptobrevin or other docking or fusion proteins, are not very useful for systemic therapy because their effects are not sufficiently selective. That is, parasympathetic and sympathetic ganglia and somatic neuromuscular junctions all may be blocked. However, because botulinum toxin is a very large molecule and diffuses very slowly, it can be used for injection for relatively selective local effects. That is why we do something called Botox, right, in plastic surgery. So it's a procedure. It can be selectively used. So botulinum toxin is a very large protein molecule, and does not diffuse readily when injected into the tissue. In spite of this property, it is able to enter cholinergic nerve endings from the extracellular space and inhibit the release of acetylcholine. So how might it cross the lipid membrane barrier? That is something that needs to be thought about. So now coming to adrenergic transmission. So norepinephrine is a primary transmitter at the sympathetic postganglionic neuron affected cell type synapses in most tissues. Important exceptions include the sympathetic fibers to the thermoregulatory sweat glands, which are cholinergic, and probably vasodilator sympathetic fibers in the skeletal muscle, which release acetylcholine. Dopamine may be a vasodilator transmitter in the renal blood vessels, but norepinephrine is a vasoconstrictor of these vessels. Okay. So coming to the synthesis and storage, the synthesis of dopamine and norepinephrine requires several steps. So we can discuss that in this figure. So after transport across the cell membrane, tyrosine, okay, after it is transported through the cell membrane, it is hydroxylated by tyrosine hydroxylase, which is the rate limiting step, to dopa. Okay, tyrosine to dopa, and then dopa is dihydroxyphenylalanine, and dopa is decarboxylated to dopamine. Dopa decarboxylase is what is the enzyme that occurs here. So tyrosine is hydroxylated to dopa, and dopa is decarboxylated to dopamine. So, and inside the vesicle it is hydroxylated to norepinephrine. So dopamine enters the vessel, and within the vessel it is hydroxylated to norepinephrine. Tyrosine hydroxylase, okay, this first enzyme that we see here, it can be inhibited by metyrosine. Okay, so tyrosine can be the hydroxylation of tyrosine can be prevented by metyrosine, and norepinephrine and dopamine are transmitted into the vesicles by the vesicular monoamine transporter VMAT and are stored there. Okay, they're transported into the vesicle by VMAT. Monoamine oxidase or MAO is present on the mitochondria in the adrenergic nerve ending and activates a portion of the dopamine and norepinephrine in the cytoplasm. Therefore, monoamine oxidase inhibitors may increase the stores of these transmitters and other amines in the nerve endings. VMAT can be inhibited by reserpine, resulting in depletion of neurotransmitter stores. So, monoamine oxidase is present on mitochondria at the adrenergic nerve ending, and it inactivates a portion of the dopamine. So it can increase the storage of dopamine. Okay. So coming to the release, dopamine and norepinephrine are released from the nerve endings by the same calcium dependent mechanism responsible for ACH release. In contrast to cholinergic neurons, noradrenergic and dopaminergic neurons lack receptors for botulinum and do not transport this toxin into the nerve terminal. So botulinum can only affect a neuron if the neurotransmitter is ACH. If it is an adrenergic neuron, the botulinum toxin cannot have its effect. So termination of action is also quite different from the cholinergic system. Metabolism is not responsible for termination of action of the synaptic catecholamines, norepinephrine and dopamine. Rather, diffusion and reuptake by the norepinephrine transporter NET or the dopamine transporter DAT reduce their concentration in the synaptic cleft and stop their action. Outside the cleft, these transmitters can be metabolized by MAO and COMT, that is catechol-O-methyl transferase, and the products of these enzymatic reactions are excreted. Determination of the 24-hour excretion of metanephrine, normetanephrine, and 3-methoxy-4-hydroxymandelic acid or VMA, vanillyl mandelic acid, and other metabolites provides a measure of the total body production of catecholamines, a determination useful in diagnosing conditions such as pheochromocytoma, which is an adrenal medullary tumor in which excess of catecholamines are secreted. Inhibition of MAO increases stores of catecholamines in nerve endings and has both therapeutic and toxic potential. Okay, so if you are inhibiting monoamine oxidase, that means you are increasing the storage of adrenergic neurotransmitters and you are not letting them be released. Okay, so it has both therapeutic and toxic potential. Inhibition of COMT in the brain is useful in Parkinson's disease. So what are the drug effects on adrenergic transmission? Drugs that block norepinephrine synthesis such as metyrosine, okay, which is preventing tyrosine hydroxylation, or catecholamine storage such as reserpine, or release such as guanethidine. Okay, so the release is being blocked by guanethidine, entry into the vesicles is being blocked by reserpine. Okay, so guanethidine were used in the treatment of several diseases such as hypertension because they block sympathetic but not parasympathetic functions. Other drugs promote catecholamine release such as amphetamines and predictably cause sympathomimetic effects. Next, coming to co-transporters, many or probably all of the autonomic nerves have transmitter vesicles that contain transmitter molecules in addition to the primary agents such as acetylcholine or norepinephrine previously described. These co-transmitters may be localized in the same vesicles as a primary transmitter or in a separate population of vesicles. Substances recognized to date as co-transmitters include ATP, enkephalins, vasoactive intestinal peptide or VIP, neuropeptide Y, substance P, neurotensin, somatostatin, and other things. So their main role in autonomic function appears to involve modulation of synaptic transmission. Now coming to ANS receptors. So the major receptor systems in the ANS include cholineceptors, adrenoceptors, and dopamine receptors, which have been studied in detail. So first coming to cholineceptors, also referred to as cholinergic receptors, these molecules respond to acetylcholine and its analogues. So again, cholinergic receptors are divided into muscarinic or M-type and nicotinic or N-type receptors. Okay, we again have 5 types of muscarinic receptors, but only 3 are mentioned here. M4 and M5 are found in the CNS. Okay, you can remember it like this. We are talking about the nervous system. So M1 is found in the nerve endings. Okay, so if you're talking about ANS pharmacology, so our first criteria is to talk about the nervous system. So nerve endings have M1. Next, coming to the M2. So first you have the brain. Okay, next what do you have? An important organ below the brain, you have the heart. Alright, so you have the heart and some nerve endings in case of examples for M2 receptors. And M3 receptors are found in the effector cells such as smooth muscles, glands, endothelium, etc. Okay, so you can remember it with an easy trick. So first you think about something, okay, and if your heart allows you to like it, then you will eat it. Okay, so you think about something, first think about it, nerves. Okay, then if your heart says okay, if your heart allows you to like it, if you love it with the help of your heart, then you can eat it. Or eating is an effector cell activity such as smooth muscles, glands, endothelium, etc. Okay, so you can remember 1, 2, 3 as Q, I, Q. All of these muscarine receptors are G protein coupled receptors. Okay, so what are the major functions? So again, GQ 1 and 3 are GQ receptors, right? QI quick. So IP3 and DAG cascade, IP3 and DAG cascade. 2, your heart. So GI coupled, right? So there is a decrease in CAMP and it activates K plus channels. Alright. So because M2, M1 muscarine receptors are a part of the parasympathetic system or cholineceptors, so what they're supposed to do is they're supposed to cause negative effects on the heart such as negative inotropy, dromotropy, chromotropy and bathmotropy. So they have to decrease cyclic AMP and activate K plus channels for K plus influx to cause these slowing effects on the heart. So as the name suggests, these receptors respond to muscarine, an alkaloid, as well as to acetylcholine. The effects of activation of these receptors resemble those of postganglionic cholinergic nerve stimulation. Muscarinic receptors are located primarily on autonomic effector cells, including heart, vascular, endothelium, smooth muscle, presynaptic nerve terminals, and exocrine glands. And all 5 are G protein coupled receptors. Now coming to nicotinic receptors, they are located on Na plus K plus ion channels and they respond to acetylcholine and nicotine, another acetylcholine mimic, but not to muscarine. They open the channel. Okay. So the 2 types of nicotinic receptors are NN and NM. M for muscle, right? So it is at the neuromuscular end plate at the NMJ neuromuscular junction. So the mechanism, Na plus K plus ion channel, it causes depolarization and evokes an action potential. Okay, all nicotinic receptors do that. Okay, and N is present in the nervous component, that is ANS ganglia. So now coming to the adrenoceptors, they are also referred to as adrenergic receptors and they are divided into several subtypes. So first we have alpha receptors. These are located on vascular smooth muscle, presynaptic nerve terminals, platelets, etc. Alpha receptors are further divided into alpha 1 and alpha 2. These 2 subtypes constitute different families and use different G coupling mechanisms. So what are they? We have alpha 1 and alpha 2. Alpha 1 is again present on the effector tissues. Alpha 2 is present on the nerve endings. M1 was present on the nerve endings, so here alpha 2 is present on the nerve endings. So again, quick is always what stands true, so QI in this case. So Q, increase in IP3DAG, I, decrease in cyclic AMP. So what are the major functions? So it causes contraction in secretion because, well, IP3DAG, it is associated with calcium. Decrease in CAMP rate, so it decreases the neurotransmitter release, and it causes contraction of the muscle. Now coming to the beta receptors. So these receptors are located on most types of smooth muscle, cardiac muscle, and some presynaptic nerve terminals and lipocytes. Beta receptors are divided into three major subtypes: beta 1, beta 2, and beta 3. These subtypes are rather similar and use the same GS coupling protein. So beta 1 is present on the cardiac muscle and the JG cells, so your heart and the kidney. Okay. Beta 2 is present on the liver and the heart. Beta 3 is present on the adipose cells. Okay. Signet ring shape appearance, and so you can remember it that way. So beta 1 is present on the cardiac muscle and juxtaglomerular apparatus. You can remember beta is beta, which means child in Hindi. And what do children do usually? They have trouble urinating. So with that urination, you can remember JG apparatus and cardiac muscle. Next, beta 2, you can come to the liver and the heart. Okay. And beta 3, you can come to adipose cells. So if your child is eating too much, 3, then he will become fat, so adipose cells. If he is eating just optimally, muscle mass will increase, so smooth muscles. Okay, stuff like that. So all the beta receptors are GS coupled receptors. So there is an increase in cyclic AMP, and all are positive effects. Increase in lipolysis. Okay, so increase in heart rate, force of contraction, and renin release. Relaxation of smooth muscle. Increase in glycogenolysis. So breakdown is increased. Okay, there is relaxation of the renal vascular smooth muscle. Finally, coming to the dopaminergic receptors. Dopamine D or DA receptors are a subclass of adrenoceptors, but with rather different distribution and function. Dopamine receptors are especially important in the renal and splanchnic vessels and in the brain. Although at least 5 subtypes exist, the D1 subtype appears to be the most important dopamine receptor on the peripheral effector cells. D2 receptors are found on presynaptic nerve terminals. D1, D2 and other types of dopamine receptors occur in large numbers. So now coming to the effects of activating autonomic nerves. Each division of the ANS has specific effects on organ systems. These effects should be memorized. So dually innervated organs such as the iris of the eye and the sinoatrial node of the heart receive both sympathetic and parasympathetic innervation. The pupil has a natural intrinsic diameter to which it returns when both divisions of the NS are blocked. Pharmacological ganglion blockade therefore causes it to move to its intrinsic size. Similarly, the cardiac sinus node pacemaker has an intrinsic rate of about 100 to 110 beats per minute in the absence of both ANS inputs. So how will these variables change if the ganglia are blocked? The answer is predictable if one knows by which system is dominant. So normally both the pupil and at rest and the sinoatrial node are dominated by the parasympathetic system. Thus the blockade of both systems with removal of the dominant PANS and non-dominant SANS effects result in mydriasis, D for dilation. So dilation of the pupil, okay, dilation of the pupil, and also tachycardia, okay, faster heartbeat. So coming to noradrenergic non-cholinergic transmission, some nerve fibers in autonomic effector tissues do not show the histochemical characteristics of either cholinergic or adrenergic fibers. Some of these are motor fibers that cause the release of ATP and other purines related to it. Purine evoked responses have been identified in the bronchi, gastrointestinal tract and the urinary tract. Other motor fibers are peptidergic, that is, they release peptides as a primary transmitters. Some fibers may release nitric oxide, a highly permeant gas that is not stored but synthesized on demand. Other noradrenergic non-cholinergic fibers have the anatomical characteristics of sensory fibers and contain peptides such as substance P that are stored in and released from the fiber terminals. These fibers have been termed sensory efferent or sensory local effector fibers because when activated by a sensory input, they are capable of releasing transmitter peptides from the sensory ending itself, from local axon branches and from collaterals that terminate in the autonomic ganglia. In addition to their neurotransmitter roles, these peptides are potent agonists in many autonomic effector tissues, especially smooth muscle. So coming to the sites of autonomic drug action,
Because of the number of steps in the transmission of autonomic commands from the CNS to the effector cells, there are many sites at which autonomic drugs may act. These sites include the CNS centers, the ganglia, the postganglionic nerve terminals, the effector cell receptors, and the mechanisms responsible for transmitter synthesis, storage, release, and termination of action. The most selective effect is achieved by drugs acting at receptors that mediate very selective actions, and many natural and synthetic toxins have significant effects on the autonomic and somatic nerve function. Coming to the integration of autonomic function, functional integration in the ANS is provided mainly through the mechanism of negative feedback and is extremely important in determining the overall response to endogenous and exogenous ANS transmitters and their analogues. This process uses modulatory pre and postsynaptic receptors at the local level and homeostatic reflexes at the system level. So, coming to local integration, local feedback control has been found at the level of the nerve endings in all systems investigated. The best documented of these is the negative feedback of norepinephrine upon its own release from adrenergic nerve terminals. This effect is mediated by alpha 2 receptors located on the presynaptic nerve membrane. Okay, so let us just discuss a few of these actions. So we discussed that mydriasis was what was supposed to happen because of sympathetic action. So if the muscles of the iris constrict because of parasympathetic action, the pupils will dilate. Okay, so that is why your circular muscle and your ciliary muscles will constrict. Okay, because of all the C's will constrict in the eye because of parasympathetic action. So all these are mediated by M3. Okay, M1 we said we needed to think about it. Okay, so nerve terminals. M2, if we liked it, then we could leave it to the fate of our effector cells. So effectors. Okay, so that is how we remember. So all these eyes are effectors, right? Next, coming to the heart, you are supposed to have M2 receptors, so parasympathetic. So they are supposed to decrease everything related to your heart, and sympathetics will activate everything related to your heart. So sympathetics, what did you have? You had beta 1 primarily on the cardiac muscle cells, and beta 2 in the heart and liver and other cells. Okay. So whereas coming to the eye, the sympathetic, you had radial RA, so alpha 1 receptor, so it causes contraction, and if parasympathetics is causing contraction of C or ciliary muscle, then beta receptors must cause relaxation. Okay. Next, coming to blood vessels, so they are actually escaping from acetylcholinergic innervation. So coming to the sympathetic innervation, basically alpha causes contraction, beta causes relaxation, and again alpha causes contraction, and muscarine receptors, they cause relaxation, but they are again cholinergic muscarine receptors. Next, coming to bronchiolar smooth muscle, you need to remember something: sympathetic vasoconstriction, sympathetic bronchodilation. Similarly, the exact opposite holds true: parasympathetic vasodilation, parasympathetic bronchoconstriction. Okay, so bronchoconstriction is what happens in the case of parasympathetics. Secretion increases, the smooth muscles contract. Okay, the sphincters relax, and myenteric plexus is activated. That is what causes the smooth muscles to contract, and you have several receptors that are causing these actions. All right, and similarly the sympathetic receptors. And next, coming to the bladder wall and all this, so basically your parasympathetics, they cause contraction of the smooth muscles and relaxation of the sphincters. So that is what's happening again. Parasympathetics cause erection of the penis, sympathetics cause ejaculation of the sperm. Okay, so there's a difference. Ejaculation of the semen, and again that's what's happening. Coming to the skin, sweat glands, we talked about it, cholinergic innervation, and again thermoregulatory. Apocrine also cholinergic. Thermoregulatory is actually cholinergic, apocrine is actually noradrenergic. Next, we have metabolic functions. Okay, the alpha is kind of increasing the lysis, so glycogenolysis and lipolysis, beta 3 in the fat cells, okay, if you eat too much. So that's about it. Now coming to the text, presynaptic receptors that bind the primary transmitter substance and thereby regulate its release are called autoreceptors. Transmitter release is also modulated by other presynaptic receptors or heteroreceptors in the case of adrenergic nerve terminals. Receptors for acetylcholine, histamine, serotonin, prostaglandins, peptides, and other substances have been found. Presynaptic regulation by a variety of endogenous chemicals probably occurs in all nerve fibers. So coming to the steps in autonomic transmission and the effects of various drugs. So we have local anesthetics such as tetrodotoxin, which is found in pufferfish, and saxitoxin, which is found in red tides such as gonioli. So they act at the nerve axon level and they block the sodium channels and they block nerve conduction. So that is why seafood such as eating pufferfish or food that has gonioli or red tide saxitoxin in it, it blocks your nerve conduction. Next, transmitter synthesis, we talked about this. Hemicholinum, it is preventing choline from entering into the cells, blocks uptake of choline, slows the synthesis of acetylcholine. Okay. Next, metyrosine, we talked about it in adrenergic neurotransmitter action. So it was preventing tyrosine from being hydroxylated. So it slows down the synthesis of norepinephrine. Coming to transmitter storage, here we have vesamicol, here we have reserpine. The action is same, but in different neurons. Coming to transmitter release, so botulinum toxin only acts on cholinergic vesicles and prevents the release, whereas many neurotransmitters, they act at this level at nerve terminal membrane receptors and modulate the release. And we have Conus, a toxin of marine snails of the genus Conus, that is conotoxin. Conotoxin, C in the name, so it blocks nerve terminal calcium channels and reduces the release. Okay. So we have tyramine and amphetamine, which promote the release. Next, coming to transmitter uptake after release, so we have cocaine and tricyclic antidepressants, which act at the adrenergic nerve terminals and inhibit the uptake and increase the neurotransmitter effect on postsynaptic receptors. So they inhibit the uptake and increase the effect. So coming to receptor activation or blockade, so we have norepinephrine, we have phentolamine, okay, we have isoproterenol and propanolol. Okay, all these lols are beta blockers. Alpha blockers. They act on receptors at adrenergic junctions. They bind beta receptors and activate adenylyl cyclase, bind alpha receptors and prevent activation. Okay, and we have tubocurarine, which acts at the neuromuscular end plates. Curare acts by mechanism of persistent depolarization. Okay, competitive inhibition. Suxamethonium, all those act by persistent depolarization. And then atropine acts on parasympathetic effector cells, and then neostigmine again, so it prolongs and intensifies the transmitter action and inhibits the enzyme. Anyways, so postsynaptic modulatory receptors including M1 and M2 muscarinic receptors and at least one type of peptidergic receptors have been found in ganglionic synapses, where nicotinic transmission is primary. These receptors may facilitate or inhibit transmission by evoking slow excitatory or inhibitory postsynaptic potentials, EPSPs or IPSPs. Coming to systemic reflexes, systemic reflexes regulate both blood pressure, gastrointestinal motility, bladder tone, airway smooth muscle, and other processes. The control of blood pressure by the baroreceptor, neural reflex, and the renin-angiotensin hormonal response is especially important. So these homeostatic mechanisms have evolved to maintain MAP at a level determined by the vasomotor center and renal sensors. So any deviation from this blood pressure set point causes a change in the ANS activity and renin-angiotensin and aldosterone levels. For example, a decrease in blood pressure caused by hemorrhage results in increased SANS discharge and renal release. Consequently, peripheral vascular resistance, venous tone, heart rate, and cardiac force are increased by norepinephrine released from sympathetic nerves. This ANS response can be blocked with ganglion blocking drugs such as hexamethonium. So hexamethonium is a ganglion blocking drug. Hexamethonium is a ganglion blocking drug. Blood volume is replenished by retention of salt and water in the kidney under the influence of increased levels of aldosterone, and these compensatory responses may be large enough to overcome some of the actions of drugs. For example, the chronic treatment of hypertension with a vasodilator such as hydralazine will be unsuccessful if compensatory tachycardia via the baroreceptor reflex and salt and water retention via the renin system response are not prevented through the use of additional drugs. Okay, so hydralazine to treat hypertension is useless if salt and water retention and tachycardia are not treated with other drugs. Okay, so this figure represents the local control of autonomic nervous system function via modulation of neurotransmitter release. Okay, so that is what is happening. You have a negative feedback control. That is especially true in the case of acetylcholine. Okay, and next, coming to this figure, it represents the hormonal control of cardiovascular function. Two feedback loops are present: the autonomic nervous system loop and the hormonal loop. Okay, each major loop has several components. So in the neuronal loop, in this loop right here, the sensory input to the vasomotor center is by glossopharyngeal and vagus nerves, which are both parasympathetic. On the efferent side, the sympathetic nervous system directly influences four major variables: peripheral vascular resistance, heart rate, contractility, and venous tone. Okay, peripheral vascular resistance, heart rate, contractility, and venous tone. The parasympathetic nervous system directly influences heart rate. Okay, parasympathetic directly influences heart rate. In addition, angiotensin 2 directly increases peripheral vascular resistance, and sympathetic nervous system discharge directly increases renin secretion. Because these control mechanisms have evolved to maintain normal blood pressure, the net feedback effect of each loop is negative. Feedback tends to compensate for the change in arterial blood pressure that evoked the response. Okay, so decreased blood pressure due to blood loss would be compensated by increased sympathetic outflow and renin release. Conversely, the elevated pressure due to the administration of a vasoconstrictor drug would cause reduced sympathetic outflow, decreased renin release, and increased parasympathetic vehicle outflow. Okay, so vasomotor center has a proper set point. If it is activating the sympathetic nervous system, there are four things that can take place. Peripheral vascular resistance can be increased, the heart rate can be increased, contractility can be increased, and venous tone can be increased. Okay, peripheral vascular resistance, it is influencing the mean arterial pressure. Again, baroreceptors are regulating it. So heart rate, cardiac outputs is equal to stroke volume into heart rate. So stroke volume into heart rate, that will give you cardiac output, and that in turn controls the mean arterial pressure. Venous tone is responsible for venous return, which again controls the stroke volume and in turn the heart cardiac output. Okay, and the hormonal feedback loop, renin, angiotensin, aldosterone system, it controls the blood volume, which in turn mediates the venous return. Okay, so it's a high yield diagram. So coming to the eye contains multiple tissues, several of them under autonomic control. The pupil is under reciprocal control by the sympathetic nervous system via alpha receptors on the pupillary dilator muscle. So adrenergic alpha, okay, dilator muscles alpha. The parasympathetic via muscarinic receptors on the pupillary constrictor. C for constriction of the pupillary muscles, and C for parasympathetic things. So the ciliary muscle, which controls accommodation, is under primary control of muscarinic receptors innervated by the parasympathetic system with insignificant contributions from the SNS. The ciliary epithelium, on the other hand, has important beta receptors that have a permissive effect on aqueous humor secretion. Okay, so we already discussed an important case related to the botulinum toxin. It is too large a molecule to cross membranes by means of lipid or aqueous diffusion. It must bind to membrane receptors and enter by endocytosis. Botulinum binding receptors for endocytosis are present only on cholinergic neurons but not on adrenergic neurons. Okay, so that's it with this chapter.